Thank you, IDS team, for arranging this session. Shall we start? Okay. So we quickly start. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, panelists. I have got a very, very esteemed panelist along with me. I have got Aman, who's managing the transactional the CMS services at the Citi TTS. Then yeah, so I think he's the most sought after man to catch the retail frauds. Okay, and then we have Shaurya. So Shaurya brings in a lot of different perspective from the IntelleWings perspective. They're an AI company and he works very closely on that. So without a further ado, and my name is Manish Agrawal. I work for the HDFC Bank. So without further ado, I'll directly get on to the topic. And the topic is very, very simple, but the very, very difficult one. Okay. The topic, as the gentleman read out, risk and compliance in the era of digital-only platform. So the way I understand is the digital-only platform, which means that for everything, if it is happening digitally, there is a trail available. Correct? It is not like the olden era where if you do something, you might not have the trail until unless the guy made an entry on the register. Okay. So if you actually have a digital trail, then why are we talking so much about the risk, compliance, governance? Because everything is recorded. A no digital transaction can happen without having a forensic trail being available. So probably instead of talking these risk and compliance, what we should talk is only and only thing is that those records are kept and nobody steals those records. Okay. But in spite of that, other thing is, and now put out to the different perspective, if you see, India is a country at the forefront of the digital revolution. Okay. We hear only about the UPI, but I can assure you the number of DPIs, the digital public infrastructure which the country has created, and now you have India stack, you're integrating them. It's very, very high. Okay. So there is no digital divide. I'm sure many of you will be having your friends, relative in the far off location. And probably they behave or deal in the same way. They get the same forwards that you get. They get the same Insta reel that you get. They behave in the same way that we get if we are the metro. So there is no digital divide. They are still doing the UPI transaction the same way the way we are doing. And it has happened because of the golden word jam, Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile. Okay. Then, in spite of having so much of a trail, the point that I want to put it up to the panelists is, why do we actually need this much of a governance, risk and compliance? Because half the time when we meet people, everybody is talking about that. And if I may take a liberty, Aman, since you come from the city and you're into the wholesale banking, the transactional services, CMS operation, so it brings in the two perspective. One is the B2B and other one is a B2C. Okay. So when we talk about the era, today it is not limited only to B2C. It is also for B2B. So if I take a liberty and ask my first question to my esteemed panelist, Mr. Aman Singla, that how do you see the relevance and the need for risk and compliance in a B2B scenario?
Oh, no, absolutely. Thank you, Manish, and very good afternoon to all of you. See, when we look at our risk and compliance, risk and compliance is not just the mere check boxes. See, the risk and compliance, when you look at it in a larger context, risk and compliance are the enablers. They are the guardrails, which essentially helps you build resilience. They help you drive growth and innovation, and more importantly, with a confidence. Because if you don't have a risk and compliance, you will not have that confidence to scale it up. Now, see, we at Citi, we operate in close to 95 countries. It's a huge network. And day in, day out, we deal with trillions of dollars. Now, if I say I kept aside the risk and compliance on one side of it, we are going to fail miserably. It's risk and compliance is a mindset, whether you look at from a B2B perspective or you look at from a B2C perspective. I won't differentiate between a B2C and a B2B perspective. Now, historically, if we take a step back, now, there are two things. Now, historically, all the transactions, and specifically if you talk about the cross-border world and where the Citi used to have a strength, we used to deal in the B2B space largely being done by SWIFT, the C2B space through credit cards, and P2P predominantly by the money transfer agents. Now, what has happened over the period of time is there are new business models, there are new use cases which are coming up, and this is being fueled by what? Our ubiquitous UPI, by the billion plus debit cards which are there in the market, which is essentially fueling the e-commerce, I will say domestic as well as cross-border growth in India. Now, in a larger context, just to throw some numbers with you. Now, there are stats which are saying the Indian e-commerce overall will go up to 300 billion by 2030. The cross-border is going to go beyond 80 billion. And specifically, when you look at a very, very restricted B2, I'll say a C2B flow, which is LRS, currently we are sitting at $32 billion. It's going to grow manifold. Now, why these numbers and what do we really need to ensure these numbers continue to grow and we continue to accelerate? What we need is a risk and compliance mindset to be ingrained in our payment rails, in our digital platform. And then only you will see this whole piece going up. And I want to take one big example. The way the regulator itself is creating a very level playing field in the market. Yeah. Now, late last year, the Central Bank of India, they came out with a guidelines to, I'll say, standardize the cross-border flow, which is around the PACB guidelines. Now, what is this PACB guidelines? Now, from our perspective, we believe this is going to be a crucial enabler for the whole market. This PACB guidelines, what they have done is, they're trying to create a level playing field. They're trying to standardize the risk and the compliance framework in the market. They're trying to standardize the operating procedures for all the players in the entire ecosystem. They have very well defined what should be the risk management framework, what should be the baseline technology, what should be the KYC requirement. So what does it mean? Any participant in that ecosystem, they will have a confidence to operate. The customer will have a confidence. If the customer has a confidence, the customer will come back and operate and deal on that platform again and again. No wonder, like we are seeing 16 billion transactions happening on UPI. Why? If there is no trust in the platform, no one is going to come back on that platform. So what we need right now is a forward-looking regulations like this, coupled with, I would say, very innovative payment rails and the digital setup. And that's something which is going to accelerate the e-commerce, not only in India, but the cross-border as well. Thank you.
Very interesting. No, very, very interesting. So, Aman, you have put a different perspective. If I must say, so what you're saying essentially is that risk and compliance is not needed because you have to regulate something. The point which you brought in, that in case you want a business to be done smoothly, business to be done in a standardized fashion, business to be done in a scalable manner.
Yes.
Okay, then a regulation is needed to put all these things as a standardized practice,
Yep.
and then compliance to those practice will give a level playing field to each and every player to excel, and then only the service will win and the customer will win. Whether it's a B2C or a B2C, it doesn't matter. So I think a very, very good perspective, and I think what Aman has actually in a way concluded it saying that you don't require a risk and compliance for doing any compliance. What you need is to run the business and to grow the business.
See, what I want to say, it's a mindset. No one should look at risk and compliance as a constraint. It should rather be looked as an enabler or a catalyst. It gives you a peace of mind to innovate and spur the growth. That's
Superb. So now, coming on to you, Prakarsh, We heard the Aman from the perspective of a B2B,
Yeah.
and though he made it very clear whether it's a B2B or a B2C, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What you need is a risk and compliance to run the business, to run in a resilient way, and to take it faster. But what's your quick? Are you not seeing too much of a noise? Too many regulation, everything needs to be done in this fashion. If you're not doing, then this will happen, that will happen. How do you see these things? Not as a company who provides the solution,
Sure.
but from the perspective of what should the users do?
Yeah, fair enough. And thanks, Manish, for that question. And I think even if I kind of extend this question to the larger room here and generally ask, like whether governance, risk, and compliance are important, I think to a larger extent, people would say that in some sense they are important. Like what I want to substantiate is it's not just important, but with the financial aspirations that our country has, it's kind of imperative. So in a few years, we'll become a $5 trillion economy. We like are making large strides toward becoming a developed nation. And that has to happen through financial inclusion. And right now, also 190 million of us are unbanked, right? And that is a heavy number that can only be solved through a digital first approach. And I personally think that, like fortunately we are in a great space to actually do that. Like the availability of data at the prices that we have, the accessibility of devices mobile is such huge enablers along with the regulators as well as the government who kind of figured out, like how can digital be unlocked for the financial access. So I feel that digital has to be the way for us to, like reach our aspirational goals in financial parlance. And for digital to succeed, I think trust is the pivotal, tenet. And trust traditionally has been built around the parlance of a governance, risk and compliance framework. Like we see example of application, like few people don't are like confined to not using applications which are developed in certain countries just because they don't have the trust in whether they are comfortable or their data would be secure. And as businesses, I feel it's our duty essentially that when customers are essentially interacting with our application, they feel safe and they feel compliant with this. So I feel it's like the entire governance, risk and compliance is imperative for our growth on the customer side.
So very beautifully put. So at the end of the day, the way I conclude your summary is, and only two words if I have to take, or one word I have to take between Aman and you. Aman said that risk and compliance is necessary for a sustenance and the growth of a business. You mentioned that not only sustenance and growth to definitely is needed, but to create a trust in the consumer, and that consumer may be a B2B or a B2C material. Okay. And I think the sustenance can be reached, Aman, only when you have a trust. Because if you don't have a trust, you can't reach to the sustenance. Okay. So I think both the panelists have concluded that there is a need for the risk, compliance, and a governance architecture, irrespective of the fact whether we are dealing in a digital era, non-digital era. But probably a very quick half a minute and something. Do you think it is more needed in a only digital era, or it is lesser needed in the physical world?
I think the importance is equal across channels, right? I think right now the way customers are interacting through all the channels, I think there's a true need of governance in an omni-channel sort of a mechanism on how customers interact.
No, it is needed. I didn't say that it's not needed. My question is, let's say if you have to give an answer in a yes or a no, and this question I'm putting up to the audience also, think it through, and probably if we have 5 minutes, we will try to deliberate that where it is needed more, Aman.
So I'll tell you, we are living in a world of a instant gratification. No one has that patience. Physically, see, I will tend to agree with what Prakarsh said. I can't say something is less, something is more, but the need of risk and compliance in the digital-led model is much more, because everything is getting into instant gratification. There is no post facto. Everything has to happen now at the moment.
Yeah, you caught my mind.
Yeah.
You caught my mind, and yeah, we would love to have the views of the audience later. But I think I agree with you. It may not be can we classify it is not needed here or it is needed here? That classification cannot happen. It is needed everywhere. But the scale at which the digital platform will bring in, it brings in the urgency to comply on the digital only era at a much higher scale. Because in an earlier physical world, probably if you were late by a day or a 2 or a month, the impact wouldn't have been that higher on the organization. Okay, here if you're late by a minute, some 10,000 transactions happen, you know. So yeah, thanks. So yeah, I think I have a very intelligent panelist. His company is also, carrying that particular word, IntelleWings, correct, Shaurya? So we have heard the practitioners, a practitioner and the solutioner. If I have to put it in a perspective, and you also will fit in at the solution, but I would say that more than the solution, you will enable how the solution can be can be built. So what is your thought? And it's fashion to talk about AI, ML on everything, you know. Nobody and everybody will say that without this the world doesn't carry. But what's your take on such a problem statement and the solution statement?
I try to draw on what Aman and Prakarsh have said, and you have summarized, Manish, that technological platforms, at the end of the day, we're trying to build trust. And my core point would be that technological platforms are designed to build trust. We know what technology can do. We know technology can automate things, we can have centralized repositories that reduces our effort. But also at the core, if you think of information technology solutions, if you have a software solution, you'd want it to evolve. If I have an app from a noted provider, I would want it to get better with time versus, say, if I have a car, the performance would probably degrade over time. So it has to evolve and get better with time. It has to be scalable. If I tomorrow build an e-commerce business and it cannot handle loads in Diwali season, it's going to crash. It's not going to work. It has to be customer-centric. Any technological platform that is built, it has to be easy to use. Nobody is going to take a 2-month course to learn how to use an app. In a digital-only era, my argument would be that technology, instead of becoming the sidekick or an enabler, becomes the primary protagonist. And now if we shift focus to GRC, it's practically impossible for me to build a technological platform where I don't take GRC into account. I think Aman has hinted at it, that GRC is core to technological platforms. So say if tomorrow I go and open a banking account, I sit at home and I want to open a banking account digitally. The GRC journey is embedded. I will have to upload my Aadhaar card. I'll have to do my video KYC. So GRC, and these are elements of the larger GRC landscape, but it's not discrete from the platform as such. So if I'm building a GRC platform, I have to think on those terms as well. If I build a video KYC solution which can read my facial data but is very difficult to use, that is not going to work. So all these elements, the elements that I spoke about, scalability, resilience, evolvability, customer centricity, they have to be embedded within GRC systems as well. And again, GRC systems in a digital-only era cannot do without technology. Technology becomes central to it. Having said that, I would not say that everything is good with technology. Technology does introduce risk. For example, technology does introduce cybersecurity risk, and we have seen multiple large organizations struggle to deal with those risks. They have exposed large amounts of PII data, which not just is bad for the organization, but also weakens the ecosystem as a whole. So when I advocate for technology, or when someone advocates for technology, we also have to keep in mind that there are risks that technology brings in, and we have to have adequate measures to minimize, mitigate, and manage those risks.
So thank you. So I think you touched a couple of points, and if I get it right, the first thing which you talked about, that the technology partner or the tech individuals have to play a much important and a larger role. They are no ways the sideways, okay? And on this particular item, one thing which comes to my mind, uh, long back when I started my career, at that point of time, we never used to talk about AI/ML, and I was related with the automobile industry. So once I was having a discussion, any guess who are the highest paid in an automobile sector within those companies? Which department is, at least at those point of time, I may not have the, but who's the highest paid department? Any guess? Yes. So it was not the sales guy, okay, who used to bring in the business. It was actually the R&D department in an automobile industry who were paid more or regarded at a much, higher notch, because that was something which used to drive the product. And if I can draw the corollary, today in any sector, and when you come to the digital only platform, actually it's a tech, okay, who is actually designing everything. And that's where we see that lot of, technology graduate are leading the, the largest companies in the world, and they might not have anything to do with the industry which they are leading. Okay, and I think that's a very, very important point that you brought in. The second point that you brought in was from the perspective of that how these things and these checks can be inbuilt. Okay, and I don't know, I'm an account professional, and I always believe in the internal audit and internal control, okay, when we used to study. So those were the checks that we used to create in a physical scenario. Today, when you are creating and designing a digital only platform, how do we ensure this? That it's a very simple, the solutions are always simple, that what goes out has to come in, okay? The right and the left hand side has to match, okay? Yeah, it's a very, very simple system, okay? But most of the places where we feel that we have missed out, or there has been a loss, or there has been a governance issue, or the compliance issue, if I can coin a one simple word for everything, is that probably we have missed somewhere the reconciliation process, okay? So I take your idea, what you're talking about, that at the end of the day, it's about the inbuilt design, that how you build in the design in a fashion, and that's where the entire blockchain is. So can I come to the same question and ask the same questions to you? Why do you think that the blockchain has not taken or got this much of importance in spite of having such a simpler and a diligent solution? And every time we are just, and one more item, that's one question. The second question is, you talked about initially the infrastructure availability. Apart from the infrastructure availability, where do you get the mind? And the third question, which I'm again asking you, so probably I will also have to repeat, as is whether the cloud is as secure. Because this is something that, this is one thing that for which we all have been debating.
I'll take the blockchain question first. But while I answer this, the caveat that I'm not a blockchain expert, even though I really love blockchain as a technology. I may be a proponent, but I'm not an expert. I think blockchain integrates the question of audit trail, what you mentioned. There are end-to-end audit trails, and hence blockchain is able to create that element of trust without there being a central authority, a government regulator. But at the same time, I see a couple of issues with blockchain. One is the proof of concept, the proof of stake, which is a mathematical algorithm which leads to that creation of that audit trail, is also very expensive. Any technological solution which is computationally very expensive is difficult to scale. Secondly, blockchain allows for anonymity. It does not need a regulator, so we don't know the identity of who's doing what. And what has happened is the bad actors, they have taken control of blockchain in a way, started using bitcoins, etc., crypto coins to do all kinds of shady stuff, which is why regulators have come down very hard on blockchain. Having said that, there are also cases where the regulators are pushing technologies or solutions based on blockchain. For example, in India, there is this CBDC, which RBI is promoting, and that is again based on blockchain technology. RBI has not very specifically spoken about what is at the back end, but we believe it's blockchain. So, warehousing is also example. Yes. Yes, so all this, I would not say that blockchain has failed as such. Maybe for now, blockchain has not taken off as much as we had hoped it to take off, but I feel there's still scope for blockchain. We will have to, again, set those guardrails. Blockchain allows for audit and trust building, but also within that whole ecosystem, we'll have to, Aman spoke of guardrails, will have to build those regulatory guardrails in. The second question is asked about cloud. I'll very quickly say, again, I'm not an expert on cloud infrastructure, but I think on security, we have improved. We have improved quite a bit. And when we work with clients, we see that clients are also much more aware. Mathematically, there are a lot of algorithms, hashing, encryption, etc., which is being used for data at rest, data transit. Security has become much more central whenever we talk of technology. No technology is secure until and unless it is properly set up, it is properly configured. But having said that, there are also these cloud providers provide all these tools which ensure security to a certain extent. At the end of the day, technology can only be as secure as the human mind is. If I give away my user ID password to my banking account, it's going to get hacked. Yeah, I think you had one more question.
The one more thing is that while you talked about the infrastructure, what about the mind?
Yeah, I think that's a very tough question to answer, and I don't have any solutions.
No, very interesting, very interesting. So as I'm mindful to the time, I think the next round of question that I have is a very, very quick one, and I would be requesting each gentleman to, not take more than 2 minutes. So, Aman, first to you. What is the right balance? I know you have propagated and put it beautifully that it is needed for the growth, to run the institution. You need to have between the risk compliance and the business objectives. But what should be the right balance? Are we overdoing it?
See, we need to, again, I'll go back to the point which I made earlier. See, why are we even talking about a question of a right balance? Do we have a choice not to do risk and compliance? That's number one. Let's take a step back. My point is, whenever people think about risk and compliance, and I think so we have come a long, long way. We are still in our minds think it's a constraint. And I would say it's not a constraint. It is rather a catalyst. And see, the way we need to think through, and we have to, let's say, balance the growth vis-a-vis what's happening on the risk and compliance on the regulatory framework, there are a few things we need to keep it in our mind. As I said, as an organization, we need to think, this is the mindset. When we are working on any product development, risk and compliance should not be seen, okay, I've done it. At the end, I will see what RBI wants, what FIO. No, it's a mindset. It has to be an integral part from the word go. From the initial inception itself, your system, when we are designing something, regulatory checks and balances should be done there and then itself. And it's also about partnering with the regulators. If there is any new technology which is coming up, if there is new thought process which is coming up, we need to go partner with regulators, explain to them if it is technology, run it past the sandbox environment. Right. The idea is, we come out of that mindset, it's like, if I have to deliver to my client, I have a need, and I keep that need in my mind and deliver. When I deliver, risk and compliance is inbuilt into that. If we come out of that mindset, oh, I have to take care of something additional, I think so it's a part of my life. Once it becomes a part of my life, I don't have to balance it. It goes in the flow.
Very beautifully put, Aman, and I loved it. So basically, what you're talking is that it has to be a self-regulation. It is not to be a. It is not to be seen as somebody is asking me to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. It has to be. So it is like a body.
See, one thing I want to add is whenever there is any change which comes from the regulator, like there is always an inertia. Like as a human, even if it's a regulation or a diversion on a road, I will always look at, oh, I used to go straight. Why should I take a left turn or a right turn? But in the longer run, I'll say, oh, this left turn takes me to a central highway, which takes me to the office in 10 minutes. I'll be pleased. So at times, we need to give away the short-term pleasures for a long-term benefits.
No, superb, superb. Very beautifully put. So I come to you straightforward. Now you tell me in a very, very simple word, and you have lot many solutions as an institution that you offer. Why all these should not be done remotely? So I get two things from the discussion. One, it has to be embedded into the day-to-day architecture on a transactional. Okay. And if anything over and above has to be done, it should be done remotely. Why do you need people to sit at multiple branches, multiple places? The branches have been replaced by the data centers or the processing hubs. Okay. So what's your take, Prakash?
Yeah, just doubling down on the importance of it, I think the entire parlance of compliance has to be looked at from the view of, it being, what is the intent and purpose behind it, right? And I think businesses which kind of take compliance at the core can essentially lead to having a set of customers which are, in terms of quality, much more better and can lead to sustainable businesses. Now, in terms of remote, control of all of these, I think one of the things that we have to see what kind of risks are kind of evolving in the system and what is our learning based off the type of frauds that have happened. And one of the things that we'll see is, the traditional data models or the systems that we have in place not necessarily factor in, the context behind something. So I'll try to contextualize this with an example. Like imagine there's a small merchant who's selling groceries in a tier 3, district in India. And right now all of this is fine, they accept payments. However, when you evaluate, let's say, bank statements, you realize that majority of the transactions are through NEFT. And if you put all of these in isolation as isolated data points, okay, small merchant, great, MSME selling groceries in tier 3 part of India and having a bank statement, all in isolation are great. But when you put it together, the element of risk suddenly rises because there is a contextualization around, okay, whether these data points in isolation, when put together, are they matching the profile or not? And that's where I feel that a lot of, context and profiling needs to come together when we evaluate risks. And that's where, it cannot all be in isolation and remote as how I like to put it.
So what you're saying is it gives you a better comprehension of the problem. And again, if I go back to my study days, a simple thing was data when it is collated in a meaningful method, then it becomes an information.
Yeah.
Data in itself is not an information, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where the MIS comes into the place.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So now the last question before we head on, because we are already 35 minutes and I have a strict instruction to close this by 40 minutes, so we will stick to that. What are the disadvantages and the advantages of too much of a compliance building and a risk architecture building into any technological platform or an online, that the subject that we have, Shaurya?
I'd say, personally, I'm always in favor of regulation. And when we speak of compliance, I'm assuming that it's because of some internal or external regulatory ask. And I feel it's very important. We have touched upon that multiple times during this panel, that regulation, risk, compliance is important for building trust. At the same time, I feel that any regulation that that is to be introduced has to be well thought out. So yesterday I was listening to someone talk about say a company based in Europe, if it has multiple branches in different countries, an HR sitting in Germany won't be able to share a CV of a candidate who is looking for a job with her peer or his peer sitting in France because of GDPR laws. And that is bad for the ecosystem as a whole. It is bad for the recruiter. It is bad for the job seeker. I feel that GDPR, of course, is great, and India is also introducing data privacy laws. We are harvesting so much of data. All of us carry a mobile device. Some of us have wristbands, watches, etc. There's so much of data that is being collected, and I, as a say consumer, if my data is being collected, I want to be sure that my data is kept private. It's not being shared without my consent. But at the same time, there has to be facilitating structures that does not stop businesses. So in this specific example of say GDPR, we probably need a consent-based mechanism where I, as a candidate, or someone as a candidate, says that I'm okay with you sharing my CV for this particular time period, for this particular reason, under particular terms and conditions. So as long as compliance does not stop business, takes these practical considerations into account before being introduced, I think they are very relevant, very important. But if they fail to do that, it's just too much.
No, I think a very apt example, very good example, and a simple example which everybody can relate to, I'm sure. So that's where we come to an end, and before we actually wrap up, I would want to ask if any of the participants have any question with the esteemed panelist that we have here.
Hello, do we have any questions? So with this, I would like to end the session.
No, don't worry. So I will take a minute before, since, I would summarize it in a very, very simple word. I think Aman brought in the point that if you want to run your business, you want to grow your business, it is very important that risk compliance becomes the part of the culture. It was complemented by Prakash that it helps you to bring in the trust, because if you don't build the trust, the businesses are built only on that foundation. Okay. Then we spoke to Shourya. Then Shourya mentioned about a very, very relevant example. He also explained beautifully what the blockchain, the good things and the bad things, but I really liked the example which you gave in the last. And that GDPR example is a very, very relevant, that are we doing a bit too much? When the means become the goal, then it is a very, very difficult task, and that's where we can see that we are tilting towards a extreme side. And I think we also touched upon from the perspective of where do you need more, and I think we summarized and that probably the speed and the urgency. I will agree with Prakash that yeah, both places are important, but it will further get complicated because in an online scenario, this is much immediately needed. Otherwise, the loss factor will be very, very high. And, and since, if I can summarize again in an automobile way, okay, just came to my mind, not that I had thought, will it be safe to assume that risk and compliance thing works like a brake in a fantastic car that you have? Because the purpose of the brake is not to stop the car, but the purpose of the brake is that you can run your car at a much higher speed. And you know that if you put the brake and whenever you require the brake, you can press it and you will be safe. I think that's where I would want to end this, and I'm very, very thankful for the panelists. Thank you so much. Hope all of you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.